Hello, and welcome to a presentation about analyzing primary resources, which I've titled Consider the Source. My goal is to help anyone interested in conducting archival research to think critically about resources which they may be looking at for the first time. This presentation will demonstrate how to examine and interpret original documents from the Houston Metropolitan Research Center's vast collection. My name is Ginger Burney, and I am the processing archivist here at the Houston Metropolitan Research Center, or HMRC. We are one of 3 special collections libraries within the Houston Public Library system. I have a master's degree in public history and a bachelor's degree in history. Before working as an archivist, I was a collections manager and curator at a local history museum in Houston. What do we mean when we say something is a primary source? A primary source is a first-hand or contemporary account of an event, topic, or perspective. Most importantly is the fact that these documents have not been modified and that they were created during the time in which you are researching. For example, if you were researching theme parks in Texas in the mid-20th century, this pictorial souvenir on the right would be a good primary source for information about Astroworld. Other examples of primary sources include letters, diaries, advertisements, photographs, reports, and recordings created during the time an event is occurring. Oral histories, newspaper articles, and autobiographies are examples of primary sources created after the event or time in question, but still can offer first-hand accounts. Now that we have identified what a primary source is, what is a secondary source? These kinds of materials are usually the product of your research with primary sources. They offer interpretation, analysis, or commentary. Secondary resources utilize or present primary source information with the addition of opinion or historical perspective. Generally, the primary sources are gathered and used to create an argument or reasoning for explaining historical events, which is presented in the secondary resource. Common examples include books, criticisms, and magazine and journal articles written after the fact. Primary resources are valuable tools for anyone conducting historical research, but it is important to remember that primary sources also represent the perspective of the document's creator and are a product of their time. This presentation will help you to consider context, purpose, and perspective when looking at a primary source. Let's begin with the question of how to analyze a primary source document. First, we meet the document. Second, we observe its parts. Third, we try to make sense of it. And fourth, we use it as historical evidence. We will come back to this image on the left a little later in the presentation. This is a primary resource commonly used by researchers at HMRC. Let's meet the document. What kind of document is this? How would you describe it? If you look on the left, you can see clearly the title page says Houston City Directory and the year 1915. There are further details on this page about the publisher of the book, the price, and some details about the content included in the directory. Once you open the book, This is what you will find on the inside of the city directory. How would you describe this? It is a fairly large book with more than 200 pages. It is printed rather than handwritten. It is a uniform light background with dark ink. There are many advertisements for various local businesses around each edge of the page. There are 2 columns per page of names listed in alphabetical order by last name. Some names are bigger and bolder than others. Some businesses' advertisements are at the top of the columns in a box. Individual names and businesses' names are listed together, and an address is provided for each listing. Additional information for individuals, such as the place or type of employment, is also usually included. Remember, this is a sort of snapshot of residences and businesses in Houston in 1915. After meeting a document and describing it, you should observe its parts. In this case, we will look at a simple letter and ask who wrote this, who was the intended audience, and when and where is it from. Remember to always question each part of the document. This is a single-page typewritten letter with a handwritten signature. The letterhead at the top reads, Free Public Library, Trenton, New Jersey, Howard L. Hughes, Librarian. This tells us the author of the letter that is also confirmed by the signature at the bottom. It is addressed to Miss Julia Idison, Librarian, Public Library, Houston, Texas. The letter is dated February 17, 1938. This gives us some context of the time that the letter was written. The letter discusses an item that appears to have been given to the library in New Jersey by mistake, and Mr. Hughes is returning it to Miss Idison. The word enclosure is written in the lower left of the document, also indicating that the item was included with the letter. I stated that you should question what you see. The name Howard Hughes stands out to many people. Howard Hughes was a famous businessman, record-setting pilot, an engineer, filmmaker, and influential personality. He had clear ties to Houston and was an adult in 1938. But why does this letter imply that he was a librarian in New Jersey? A quick check reveals that the famous Howard Hughes has the middle initial R, and the author of this letter has the middle initial L. So this was not written by the famous Howard Hughes. Instead, this Howard Hughes was a librarian in New Jersey. Next, we examine this document from earlier in the presentation. Let's try to make sense of this primary source. What is it talking about? How do the images and text work together? Context is very important for understanding this document. This appears to be a drawing titled The Eyes of Texas. It shows the moon with a face on it. The moon is looking down at the earth with an oversized drawing or outline of the state of Texas. The state has eyes that are looking back at the moon. There is a dot where Houston is located within Texas. There is an arrow pointing towards the dot and text that reads Houston, site of 60 million moonshot lab. It is a black and white, hand-drawn image that is signed Van. Van is Sidney Van Olm, who worked for decades as a cartoonist, photographer, reviewer, and reporter in the newspaper industry. He went to work for the Houston Press in 1925, where he primarily did cartoons for public service announcements, sports, and advertisements. There are many clues to understanding the context of this drawing: the theme of space and the moon, the significance of Houston being located on the map. The words moonshot are a big clue. The term moonshot was commonly used during the Apollo 11 spaceflight project, which landed the first human on the moon in 1969. Moonshot was synonymous with long shot, meaning it was a real long shot to try to get a man safely on the moon. The $60 million Moonshot Lab is no doubt referring to the location of NASA at Clear Lake, just outside Houston. The Eyes of Texas is a familiar song to many Texans, and in this drawing, the literal eyes of Texas are looking at the moon. Of course, all the eyes of the world were watching the work of NASA and the astronauts and scientists working in Houston on the moonshot effort. Now let's discuss how we can use a primary source document as historical evidence. This next example document takes us further back in time. What sort of evidence or facts does this document present? And what other documents might you look at to help you understand this event or topic? With a closer look, this document says United States Internal Revenue at the top. So it is a government-created document related to taxes. It is a pre-printed form that is filled in with handwritten information. The document is used to calculate taxes owed to the United States government on income for the year 1864. The citizen paying taxes is W.M. M. Rice, or William Marsh Rice of Houston. The date written is November 6, 1866. Rice was a very wealthy businessman and endower of funds to establish Rice University. According to the document, Rice reported earning $5,471 that year and paid $297.10 in taxes. $2 were added to the total as Rice reported owning 2 gold watches, each worth more than $100. The payment was received by the local tax collector. His signature is at the bottom. This document tells us important information about a wealthy businessman's earnings, and you have to assume it was filled in correctly and to the fullest. Also, you should consider the context. 1864 is, of course, during the Civil War. A simple inflation conversion reveals that $5,400 in 1864 is the equivalent to over $100,000 in today's money. Considering the source, diaries like this one, which belong to John Millsaps, are valuable primary sources that usually offer a singular perspective over a longer time span. Some questions to ask when analyzing a primary source like this one are: what other perspectives can you find for this same era? In this case, observations of Houston and its surroundings in the mid-1800s. What clues can you find out about the author's background or point of view? What perspective do you bring to this topic and source? As a native Houstonian, I have observations and opinions about the city's evolution in the late 20th and early 21st century. This is my perspective that I bring to analyzing this document. Finally, remember to examine all parts of a document, including the backside. This is an example of a map of River Oaks subdivision, and when you turn it over, you find invaluable facts about River Oaks that would have been overlooked had you not turned it over. You can easily start looking at primary resources by checking out our digital archive at digital.houstonlibrary.org/HMRC. There are also many great examples and suggestions about analyzing primary resources for educators at the National Archives website, archives.gov/education. Thank you for watching my presentation, Consider the Source.